Hey there, I am Barb Higgins, and this is 1,000 Tiny Steps. In this podcast, I share my stories of love, loss, triumph, and tragedy as I continue to retrace my steps and ponder what led to the death of my daughter Molly. By doing so, I hope to not only help myself, but to bring purpose and possibility to those who listen. If you are ready to laugh, cry, shake your head in disbelief, then tie, buckle, lace up, or slip on your shoes, and join me as we begin our 1,000 Tiny Steps. In the years after Molly died, I spent hours and hours and hours in therapy, talking about her death, talking about how I felt about her death, drinking, smoking, sleeping, crying, working out, talking to friends, all of the things that grieving mothers do. And most of it was helpful. Some of it was damaging. Some of it made me take longer in my grief cycle. But the turning point for me was my wonderful therapist, Elizabeth, who tried something called EMDR with me. And that was an external movement-based process that had me relive a traumatic experience in the sense of how it made me feel now, and then deal with replacing the feelings from that experience with much more functional, workable feelings. Patent example is I couldn't drive by the hospital. I would break into tears. I'd stop my car. So we went through me driving by the hospital. We replaced all of those panic-stricken, angry, sad feelings with more productive, angry feelings initially, and then, a bit of resignation. And within 3 weeks, I could drive by the hospital. This saved me 6 miles of driving to work every day. It was a 1-mile drive if I went by the hospital, 6 miles to circumvent that building. This process allowed me to begin all sorts of rearranging the neurons in my brain to begin to live a healthier, more functional life. Fast forward, I would say 2 or 3 years after these realizations for me, I had some brain tumors taken out of my head. I had a baby. And after having my baby, I landed in Amesbury, Massachusetts at a CrossFit gym. And the universe sends us who we need. So I met this wonderful woman named Michelle. And as I got to know her, we talked about everything but what we did. But we connected, we clicked, we worked out fun together. She was fun to coach when I started coaching there. As our friendship has grown and our connection has deepened, lo and behold, she works in an area of the brain and of life and of community that matches, although it's not exactly the same, the feelings and the processes and the things I've gone through since leaving traditional therapy, quitting the drugs and the alcohol, getting off all the anti-psych meds, and figuring out how can I make my brain, my dead mummy brain, a brain that can function in society and in my home and when I go to sleep at night so that I can live a productive life. After all of that, I would like to introduce you to Michelle Baker.
Thank you for having me on your amazing podcast. We've been trying this for so long to get together, and I'm really grateful that today is the day. I have been what I consider a complementary therapist my whole life. I've always done work with the human being. And by that, I mean, I've worked in many layers of the human being, both physically, energetically, emotionally, and educationally. The thing that I do, I'm a mentor to people, really. The mentor role that I take is to help people understand themselves, really, so that they can get out of any bramble and thicket that they might be stuck in.
Correct.
And there's just a number of things that I do to help them with that. The tools that I use are through somatic work, through understanding how the mind-body connection. I use neurofeedback as a tool. I use biofeedback, heart rate, variability, breathing. Really, I connect very intuitively with people, which is really why I've been so connected to the job for so long. That ability to just understand people on a different layer, a different level, has
Which
been
I think is
really
why we
helpful.
connected.
Right.
I have a lot of layers.
Right. We all do. Oh
yes,
my gosh.
yes.
We are a layered being. And I have never been quenched for my thirst for understanding people. And I don't ever want to be. I continue to educate myself over and over again, because there's the quest to find the answer the answer is there is no answer, in
Right.
a way. I mean, if we want to be philosophical about it, because there's not any one thing that is the reason for any one thing.
Right.
And so even now in my half century, I'll be a half a century in a couple of weeks.
A mere
Yeah,
child.
right, right. But I'm still learning and still to learn about the many layers of people. And we have a history, we have a past, we have a nervous system, which is really what defines all things. The nervous system is the incredible machine, the master system, let's say, that then affects all other systems. So I've made it my point in my later education to understand the nervous system more and better and how it all pertains to all other things.
Right. A little sort of, you and I met at a CrossFit gym. And so I've been an athlete my whole life, competitive distance runner forever, got into CrossFit actually in a traumatic time in my life and was immediately, I felt like I was in full-time therapy going to the CrossFit gym every day. When you go to take the trainings to become a coach, what you learn about CrossFit programming is that it's really nervous system based. It isn't how many calories are you burning and how many reps are you getting in and how many minutes are you working out. It's that your nervous system is adaptable and easily affected. And so a weight training day and a cardio day do two very different things. So as someone that has always used movement and exercise to heal myself, CrossFit fit right in. So if I were to show up in your office and say, how can you help me? What would you tell me? What would somebody expect if they came to see you?
Well, a lot of times people are coming to me for a particular service, not
Yeah.
realizing that what they need is a number of other services
Yeah.
or a number of other attention points. We go over, the history of the complaint that they're coming in about. And then that opens up so many layers. People are just results oriented, and
Right.
we are not entrained to unpack. And so the unpacking process can have a lot to do with the information that really needs to be
Right.
worked on.
Right.
And so that answer is really hard to definitively answer
Right.
because, let's say a parent what comes in because their child is having behaviors throughout a number of hours. I always work a number of hours with a family, between 20 and 30 hours over the course of a number of months, or any of my clients. In that time period, every conversation brings up a clue to another layer of what needs
Right.
to be addressed. It's not therapy that we're doing. I'm not telling them that this is what they have to do. I'm actually listening to what their nervous system is telling me through talk
Right.
or physically. I'm analyzing their body, or at least I'm observing their body. I'm observing their energy in the room, how they communicate, what their body does when they communicate. I'm looking at the nervous system communicating to the person and helping the person listen to what the nervous system is saying to them.
Right. 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 So
Yeah.
it's an educational process, which sadly,
Yes.
probably therapy should be more of an educational process than it can be sometimes. You know,
Well, there's parameters with therapy though. That's the
yeah.
thing. I'm a complementary therapist. I don't want to be a therapist because there are parameters. And when I say that, it's not like I just want to do whatever I want. It's not that, but I want to be able to do what the client needs.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that might be different than what a health insurance provider thinks they need, which
Right.
I'm trying to get to the layer of the person so that they can trust their own intuition, their own instinct about what they need. Because, I would love for them to stay with me forever. But the point is, we want to get them to fly from the nest and be comfortable
Right.
making this advocacy and accountability and being responsible for their well-being so that
Right.
they don't have to rely on other people, or they check in when they have to. But people, they don't trust their own level of power as to how they can heal and what the answers are to their questions. They don't trust their answers.
Well, you and I were chatting about this before we started the recording, and trust is such a loaded word because first of all, you have to trust yourself. And sometimes we're thrown so much information that what that does is confuses people. And now there's no trust in. So if I believe this, does that mean, what does that say about me? And, maybe that isn't true. Maybe the other thing is true. I know personally speaking, I have not had an easy life. And then Molly died. And I thought nothing that had happened to me was anything compared to that. But what it did to me for the long haul was really took away any semblance of trust I had in anything. Because I woke up one day with a daughter and I woke up the next day without one. How can you trust anything with these hard realities? And as a longtime educator and a special educator with a lot of history and education in child development, so much of teaching toddlers, babies and toddlers and preschoolers and young children requires educators to create in these children a sense of self-trust that, oh, when I hit this switch, the light goes on. If I hit it again, the light goes off. Now they know exactly what that does, and they can build from that piece of concrete knowledge a whole bunch of other assumptions and things to try. I mean, that's a really little example, but it lays it out for me. I go back to it all the time when I watch Jack, navigate the world and do things that scare the crap out of me. And don't worry, Mom, I've done this before. So,
That's
you know,
this is an incredible thing that you have here too, as a parent in a different generation who has had to learn. And what I mean by different generation, I mean in a generation of children,
right,
right? Where a couple of generations just previous to us, we were not general, like as a society, offering kids trust to do what they needed.
right,
And you have this second opportunity with Jack, which
right.
is really a blessing to let him scrape his knee,
Yes,
do something wrong, figure
yes,
it out. This is a big part of what's going on with kids today.
yes,
They do not have the level of experiential learning that you and I had when we were little,
right.
left to
Yeah,
our
we would
own
just go out and
devices.
play.
No
Yeah,
one even knew where we were. You came
no,
home when the light went out. But my kid would hate me for this. But the other day we were driving and it was like a snow day or a day off or something. And he was like, Mom, look at those kids over there. They were probably like 11 years old. And I'm like, what about them? They're just walking around by themselves. And I'm like, you're kidding me, right? That's okay that they can walk around by themselves. I don't know
yeah,
where this came from because I've raised him as a very independent person, but something about those kids just walking around the streets on their own on a regular day, it just struck him. And
yeah,
I thought, oh my goodness, I need to make sure my son is aware of the
yeah,
that layer of independence that is
yeah,
okay. I think he thought those kids were much younger than him,
right.
but that's okay. And
But it's
we
still,
we
he saw something that you and I would look at as we wouldn't even notice it,
right,
other than
right,
not wanting to hit them with our car, right?
right,
And he
right,
was stood out to him. I know that in my little neighborhood here, one thing I loved when Gracie and Molly were little was that there were like 8 other children in the neighborhood. 3 other families. One family had 4 children. The other 2 families each had 2 children, and there were Gracie and Molly. And so on the days that they weren't involved in activities, they would come home and have a snack, and out they'd go. We're going to go up and see what Rosie and Lucy are doing. We're going to go to the
right,
Bankston. Like off they'd go. And we could text each other. The kids are heading up. If it's not a good time, send them home. And I remember thinking how lucky they were because that reality didn't really exist anymore. In the
right,
80s when we had all the true crime shows and Adam Walsh,
right,
that little boy that disappeared, and now suddenly don't let your kids come home alone and
right.
organize play dates, and we overstructured ourselves. It's interesting because as an educator, a long time, I'm old now. I'll be 62 this summer. I can collect my socials if I want. I know, woohoo! I know that the pendulum swings all the time. New math, old math, new math, old math, like it all comes around. And I look at what we expect of our children, and I look at nutrition and food, so many things that underwent massive changes in the latter part of the last century that are coming around again because you start to realize you see the effects of these things. And Gracie, my daughter, who has a degree in early childhood, her favorite saying is allow your children to do dangerous things carefully.
Totally.
Like that's Jack standing on the back of the couch and face first diving into the air to land on these beanbag chairs. And, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I know that a lot of people would look at me like I was nuts letting my child do this. Well, okay. And if he does bonk himself, then There was a funny thing there was like a meme on social media of a little kid who's going to put like a fork in a light socket. Not that you want to let your kids do that, but I mean, and the mother's like, no, 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 it's dangerous. And the dad's like, no, go ahead, do it. And zap, won't do that again, will you?
Right.
And like
It's
finding,
true.
like, I'm not going to let Jack put a fork in a light socket, but I'm certainly going to let him walk on slippery ice. I'm
Sure.
going to let him,
Yeah.
climb on the back of something. Like, there was a huge treehouse thing in Bali when we were there, and all the kids were climbing on it. And I didn't feel he was ready to do it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to let him do it. And it took him like 20 minutes, but he got up there. Then I had to go up and
Yeah.
get him, which was pleasant. Yeah, coming down was a whole different beast.
But it
Mom!
built a sense of confidence in Jack,
Yes,
and he's
yes,
still a little person. So that sense
yes,
of confidence that he could climb this enormous tree, that
yes,
spills over into
yes,
so many
yes,
other things and experiences that that's a blessing for him to have
yes,
experienced that. And I mean, it
yes,
seems so small, but it's not. Going back to the child, like Jack jumping off the couch into the beanbag chair, there's also a certain the worry that parents put on to kids is
yes,
also a little bit of an epidemic too.
yes,
Oh
yes,
my God, I don't want you to hurt yourself. It's like a sense of anxiousness that they have about the hurting themselves, the kids
yes,
hurting themselves. And so a child might not have ever thought, oh my gosh, that's going to hurt me. But now, especially because a parent is generally the trusting source,
right,
the trusting source has now put it in my head that if I do this, I'm going to hurt myself. So I need to
right.
be cautious and careful. It's a very interesting fine line right now that's
Yeah,
happening.
I agree. I agree. So trust. So when I think about the brain, and I'm going to go to the mind-body connection for a bit. When I was a collegiate athlete, 9,000 years ago, we had a sports psychologist come work with us. So I was a female distance runner. To be a good distance runner, you need to be able to tolerate extended amounts of time being very physically uncomfortable. You're out of breath, every muscle is screaming, you don't want to keep going, but the race has only just begun. And you
Right.
have a scholarship, so there's no dropping out because you're tired, and you can't signal to your coach to have someone, take a timeout and someone else runs for it. And then, of course, nerves and all this. So lucky for me, I just was intrinsically born with a really good ability to compete well. Like the nerves around competing, I could function well in them. But we had lessons in biofeedback, and the way that we learned it was this visualization exercise where we held our arm out and we just thought of a strong arm, strong arm, strong arm, and the psychiatrist could or the psychologist could push it down, no problem. Then he had us put our arms out, and we went through this whole visualization process of somebody we loved in a burning building, and our arm was the fire hose. Now, think about that. Now you're shooting water, you're putting that fire out. He couldn't push down anyone's arm. It was amazing. The whole lesson there was that we already had the power inside of our
Right.
heads to manipulate how strong our body was, how fast it could run, all by sending messages that obviously signaled the nervous system in different ways. So I don't know if that was putting us into fight or flight or what it was doing, but I never forgot it. In my own coaching, I spent a lot of time trying to teach my female runners things to think about while they ran that sort of took them away from focusing on how crappy they felt. For me, a lot of it too was dissociation. I was abused as a child and I was very good at stepping out. And the number of female distance runners that suffered sexual abuse as children is a ridiculous amount, like elite level distance runners. And we all talk about how, well, yeah, you just step right out, you just go to your place, and then the
Right.
race is
Right.
over. In terms of, like, I noticed on your website you offer neurofeedback, biofeedback. So what are some things that you work with or teach your clients? Or obviously I had the fire hose experience, but that's a small example.
The neurofeedback is basically there to teach the brain how to operate in a different default pattern. We have over time developed a default pattern that is conducive to our fight or flight, our fear response, our, fleeing response, our reaction response. And we're trying to teach the nervous system. The neurofeedback is helping through neuroplasticity, through changing how the
Yes.
neurons respond to stress responses. We're doing that with the brain. And then I'm peripherally with the mentoring, helping people leave the office and give them a task to force themselves to face, right? So to give them, it's not like an aversion therapy of any kind.
No.
It's more in order to exercise this muscle, you have to come at it in from different directions, like CrossFit, or, you can't just rely on one thing being the sole answer to a challenge.
Right.
The neurofeedback is ultimately the nervous system and the brain to relax the frequency that it's in, the hyper aroused frequency. And then we're creating small successes so that every time a person feels like they've conquered a challenge, they feel successful enough to take the next step and to try something different. And then all of a sudden, the muscle to face challenging circumstances become stronger. And then you don't think about it. We're just kind of doing it naturally. We are just creating a new habit that is not centered around fear and flight.
Right.
So
oh my gosh, this is so true on so many levels. My goodness.
Yeah. And this is where trusting your resilience comes in, sometimes I have to work with parents, and I do a lot more work with parents than I did when I started out with this part of my career. But I'm also helping parents understand how they are responding to their little people's challenges.
Right.
Because they are teaching the little people how to respond to things. And even if a mom wants to be like, go ahead, go make friends with a group of kids you don't know, be brave. But it's also how the parents are acting when they have challenges that the kids are picking up on.
Yeah, the kids they're so intuitive. They take it all in way more than we give their little brains credit for.
Well, and this is the thing. When a family comes in, I'm like, I want you to know that I'm an advocate for the child, and the child is not the only person who has to make changes here.
Right.
I'm very upfront about that. And, some parents are open to that, and some parents don't know what that means. But I speak openly with the parents about things. I check in with both of them if there's two. And we are trying to understand. I want to get their perspective on how the child is responding to certain things, and then help them make little adaptations that might be a little bit more supportive to the child. And I'm not trying to say, your child's misbehaving, we got to turn our lives around to make the child happy. That's not what I'm saying. It's not like that. But children communicate through their behavior.
Right.
So if the behavior is not working, and if it's uncomfortable and disruptive, or whatever an adult considers it, there's more than one reason for it. And we have to look at the symptoms of the behavior. Now, I am not a diagnostician, so I'm not here saying it's because of this, this, and this, like ADHD or depression or anxiety, which these are more of the symptoms that people are coming to me about. My job is to help people take yourself out of that category for a minute.
Yeah.
And start to unpack one symptom at a time. Let's try to address how we can maybe change the reactiveness of the symptom, or we need to put a little fertilizer into this symptom. And maybe it's because the child's missing something, not because they're doing too much of something.
Right.
And we get into food and sleep, and I communicate with their other, with their therapists, with their teachers, because it's a functional approach. There is just not one answer to it. So my approach to working with kids or anybody is addressing every functional slice of pie in the person's life. And that's something I teach, and it's a philosophical thing for me. It's something I picked up on when I was very young, when I was reading Plato, actually. And I visualize every part of a person's life as a pie, and every slice of pie is part of the functional whole. I mean, I suggest that we are all trying to make sure that each slice of this pie is working as a system, just like the nervous system is working on the rest of the human being as a system.
Yes. Do you do like any of those like internal family systems, or where you look at everyone's role in the family? The other people that I've had on as a guest, she was really struggling with a lot of things in her life, and she spent all this time looking at the roles everyone took in their family and what things triggered the behavior of the given role
I mean, these things, stuff like that, Barb, happens as threaded
organically.
into,
Yeah.
yes, because here's the other thing too. One particular approach to something may or
Yes.
may not work for the person.
Right. Right.
So you can't be like, this is my approach. And so if it's not working for you, you must not be doing it right. That's like
Right.
the
Yeah.
wrong
Yeah.
thing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Right. Right.
not true.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really like, let's see what approach works for you and let's strengthen that. And then
Yes.
once you've found a good footing in, this aspect, let's start to look at the other aspects, because here's
Right.
the other thing with neuroregulation. Once you start working on layer by layer, new things emerge that you didn't even know existed, because our safety approach is to layer ourselves by covering stuff.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes. To
as we
build those walls
regulate,
of safety. Yeah. Yep.
right. So
Yeah.
as we start to deconstruct those things where the brain is starting to regulate, little things emerge. So I call it a well. We all have the well. Everything is in the well. It's all stuffed
Yeah.
down, some things deeper than others. And as you start to regulate, it's like condensation. Little droplets of water start to float up, and each of those little droplets are the healing process. And
Right.
then you get down to the next layer, because our trauma is so, that's layered too. So
Right.
like our response to things might be in the nervous system's response to an experience that is difficult could be backed by seven other traumatic responses that are coming together to work for
Yes.
one.
Yes. Oh
So
gosh.
it's
Yes.
just not
Yeah.
possible. It's just not possible to look at someone and say, this is what's wrong with you, and this
Right.
is how we're going to fix it. I don't support that at
Yeah,
all. And
no,
I'm not
I
like,
wouldn't either. And I say that from just experience, my own
right,
experience in unpacking my own life. But also as a coach, there are coaches that ascribe to certain philosophies. And when I say coach, I mean an athletic coach, a CrossFit coach, a life coach, an entrepreneurial coach. In my getting to know people, that they just, this is what I do. If this is what you want, I'm your person. And you know what? There are people that need it that way,
it's
but,
true.
but, but I don't, but there's a big but here, big giant but. You get to a point where, all right, you've used all that up. Not everyone can just do one thing forever and always, because life
Right,
isn't like that. There are too many incoming pathways and tributaries and a gust of wind and a sudden rainstorm that changes the whole flavor of the landscape. And now what? If you've been using an umbrella the whole time, lose the umbrella. Okay, now what? Well, okay, there are a million other things you can do without the umbrella to stay dry or whatever.
right.
I also feel, and you must, don't want to assume, but I know that when I talk to my people now, are people that have lost children or people that I've met since I've lost Molly. So there's no more expectation of people waiting for me to be something I'll never be again. And that statement right there is a huge piece of what I had to come to terms with in my own healing around Molly's death, which is something I'll never completely heal from, because you can't. But I can live a very healed life, even with this dead child a part of it. But what I know is that I brought into my reaction to Molly's death all of the things that I'd been through before. So, I came in as a on again, off again addictive person. I came in as a childhood sexual abuse survivor. I came in as somebody whose life was falling apart at the time that Molly died. I brought all these other things into the whole grief picture. Really, what started to turn the corner for me was stepping away from traditional therapy and really looking at, like, I think of Dorothy. She wore those dang red slippers and walked all the way down that yellow brick road, and she had it all along. She needed someone to point out what she already had, that she didn't need this wizard to tell her what to do, that she already knew what to do. And it was like this growth process. And I feel a little bit like that's kind of what you're doing, teaching people what they already have that can help
Right.
them to
I
find
hope that that's
peace
what,
or yeah.
right. I hope that's what I'm doing, because I trust and believe that everybody on this planet, when they are here, part of their journey is to find complete fulfillment. And it may or may not happen. I mean, this is the spiritual side of me, but it may or may not happen in this lifetime. It might be hard for this. And that's why some people are like, well, why is it so hard for me here at this time? And if my faith, which is more of just a trust in, something higher. And, I don't try to project my own belief system onto people, but I will say that I do have complete trust. So if I personally am feeling it's been a kind of a crazy time since the new year started, it's been hard for a lot of reasons. You have to pull yourself out of the why me's and
Yeah.
be like, why is this happening? What
Right.
do I need to learn from it? That's a personal journey that took me many years to feel completely grounded in. This is what I consider faith and trust to be. It's
Right.
believing, knowing that you can always count on that confidence around the answer, even if it's hard. I mean, how are we going to grow if we're not learning how to come out of the quicksand?
Right.
Challenges are going to happen. And,
Right.
I don't want to be cavalier, but I'm totally compassionate to those who feel really, really stuck. If a person is not going to believe that they can emerge, then the emergence may or may not happen at all.
Right.
And that's where you really have to believe in your personal ability to evolve into
Right.
the next layer in the healing process.
I spend a lot of time thinking about all of what you just said in terms of why am I going through this. I can get into the why me's. Every couple of weeks I have a why me day and
Sure.
I just binge a TV show on Netflix and then
Yeah.
I feel better, right?
Yeah, and
Step into
no
yeah.
one's trying to say that you can't say why me every now and then. But we
Oh,
just
true.
that is a default pattern.
Yes, yes.
The
Oh,
brain's default pattern, because the why me becomes a safe space
yes.
for us, because
Yeah.
as long as it's not us, it's someone else
Right.
that has created this situation,
Yes. Yes.
that's a safe spot for people to go
Right.
to not find answers and solutions, to create a default pattern that a person needs to then
Right.
teach their brain to get out of.
Yes. Yes. And that was me driving out of my driveway the other way. I had to consciously, in the beginning, I would drive out of my driveway, but I had a therapist that had me change the way I drove my car when I left my house. Even if my car had nothing to do with what I was stressed out about,
Right,
making a change taught my brain to make a change that I could drive up my street instead of down my street. And I was still going to get to where I needed to go. And I didn't have a set response to everything I saw on that drive because I was doing a new drive. So it
right.
was these houses and this stop sign and that traffic light, and they weren't all attached to 50 memories for every time I drove that way in the car. It really got me thinking about all of my default patterns. I know them well now. Knowledge is power, right? I think I read somewhere that you felt that self-knowledge and knowledge is a very powerful thing. Sometimes it pisses me off because I can't just pout because I'm like, oh,
Of
I'm in
course
my
you
default
can,
pattern.
but pout
Yeah,
for
I know, but I
20
mean,
minutes.
not for weeks and weeks. It's like, damn
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Come
yeah.
on.
Have a pity party, because sometimes stuff does suck. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? And it's a
yeah,
bummer. But like, you have to really, the resiliency part of it is picking yourself up and saying, all right, I've let myself have the pity party.
yeah,
I'm going to figure out what I need to do next. What am I
yeah.
supposed to learn from this? Maybe something is happening for you to deter you from getting into some kind of further
Yes,
conundrum or trouble.
yes,
I was
yes.
listening to, I love Hidden Brain. That's one of my favorite podcasts.
Hidden
And
brain.
this guy, it was a quick story. He was in the ocean on a riptide. He got pulled out of the ocean. He was treading water for most of the night, about to lose his ability to keep himself above water, and a ball floating in the ocean, able to hold on to the ball until someone came to save him. A person saw this information on the news. That ball was the ball that their kid kicked into the ocean and lost. It saved this man's life. Some people would be like, whatever. There's a lot of
Yeah.
people who are naysayers about these connections, and that's
No,
fine
no.
because it doesn't have to make sense to you.
The butterfly
But the
effect.
fact,
Absolutely.
yes, it does. So sometimes what we want is its own trauma because it
Right.
doesn't happen for us.
Yes. Yes.
And trauma is a very overly, I don't mean to say overly used word, but
No, but it is now.
true trauma is a horrible experience that has happened, right?
Right.
It's not losing your ball in the ocean. It's
Right.
something that has a tremendous effect that has, I don't even
Yeah.
want to make judgments on what trauma is for one person to another because it's not fair to do that. But
Right.
what I am saying is if something happens that is challenging, it's not just why we think it's challenging in that moment. It could be you're even trying to strengthen your resilience for something that's going to happen 5 years from now. You don't know.
Yes.
I mean,
No.
you just have to take it. And with resiliency is a big part of what I try to teach people. One of the other tough love things is a little bit of accountability.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because accountability, we have to be accountable for not only our behaviors, but our responses to things,
Yes.
because we have agency in how we respond to things. We can do it
Yes.
with grace or we can sink in the quicksand.
Yes. Yes. And looking at COVID and the years that we spent in our houses, as an educator and someone that works with young people, although I notice it in adults and politicians as well, we spent months and months and months communicating like this. Meetings were on Zoom, school was on
Right,
Zoom, texting back and forth, like social media, all of those things, magnified by a gazillion fold. I can sit here in the safety of my room and tell someone to fuck off. And then I can walk out and make some coffee. And there's no response. I can just close my laptop. I can put my
right,
phone down. So
right,
we've lost the back and forth of healthy communication. It's all very one-sided. I say what I
right.
want, you say what you want, and there's no accountability on either side. And I've noticed in the educational setting, a lot of the behavior problems came around the group of kids that were like upper elementary age during COVID, that when they went back into school are now middle schoolers. The middle schoolers who are now maybe eighth or ninth grade. That sort of 4-year age span of like 9 to 10-year-olds up to like 12 to 13-year-olds during the 2 years, the two sort of school years that really were affected by COVID. One of the hardest things to teach them is how to communicate with one another face to face, because you can't tell someone to fuck off in the same room in front of your teacher. And, oh, I'm sorry, there's a consequence for that.
Right,
And it's mind boggling to me how, the internet can bring us closer together. You and I are 60 miles apart right now, or 50 miles
right,
apart. Here we are. I'm in my cozy room with my sun shining through, and you're in your spot. We're having this amazing conversation. So we're close, except if this was the only way we interacted, then we're not interacting at all. I'm looking at your picture
right.
on my computer. It stops at a very two-dimensional level. And I think sometimes when I watch Gracie, now Gracie was collegiate at the time, so it was a bit different for her, but I just look at how difficult it is for people to communicate in real time, and how like school board meetings and even CrossFit classes a little bit. When I think of what classes were like before the pandemic and after, there's been a shift in our ability to just sort of get along and be okay with one another, because we've been able to just think and say what we want and then close the computer and walk away.
Yeah, but I don't think that's just as the result of the pandemic.
No, no,
Yeah, okay,
me
good. Yeah. I mean,
No,
I
I
think,
think it exacerbated it with a group of kids developmentally that were at a point where, when you're a teenager, that's when you're learning what can I say, what can I get away with. Now you could say or get away with anything because you were at home. So yeah, no, no, no. I think it's also just a symptom of our culture and a million
well,
things.
I will say lack of human interaction precipitated by devices anyway. And that was
Yes.
happening before the pandemic. We
Yes,
had a
long before.
crisis before the pandemic.
Oh,
It
big time.
definitely got amplified, but
Yes.
it is even worse now because the generation that we didn't have cell phones and devices.
Right.
The babies being born now have devices.
Yes.
So actually, they're
Right.
learning how to shrink their world into a little tiny space, not
Yes.
learning the periphery, not understanding how to read people's emotions,
Right.
not being able to, hear beyond their small space. We're teaching their brain how to respond to the world around them in a completely different way
Right.
and not exercising the ability to strengthen every one of their senses, which is how we navigate the world, the five senses.
Right.
And those senses, like, some of these kids are, have headsets on. They're not even hearing the
No.
background noise.
Right.
And so when they take those headsets off, guess what? Everything is very, 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 very loud. And
Yes.
when that is very loud, that triggers their nervous system because it's overwhelming. I
Yes.
mean, there are so many spider webs happening right now. And so,
Oh, and it
but
just
like
sends our brain into like panic mode
fragile,
24/7.
right?
Yeah.
It's overwhelming. It's hard to watch. It's hard to have a child who is in this culture that the way that they communicate with each other is through gaming. I'm glad that he is at least talking and he gets out, he gets off and goes to bed at an appropriate time. Some kids are online for, into 3 a.m. in the morning. They're not even getting sleep. That's disrupting our nervous system. We are on a state of fight or flight all the time, and we're not in it because we're actually scared.
Right.
We're overwhelmed. My background is actually in, the psychophysiology process. It's what is the information that comes in and how does our nervous system respond to the information?
Yes. Yes.
That's my science background.
Yeah.
And what we're having to do, what I'm doing professionally, is trying to adapt that information for each person as they come in,
Right.
because they all have a different series of layers that are contributing to their challenges.
Yeah.
But it's not because they're running after the tiger to feed themselves. That's not it. This
No.
fight or flight could be
No.
because, they saw something that they didn't like on
Right.
one of the streaming stations or one of the
Right.
social
Right.
media things. It's very overwhelming. I
Yeah,
mean,
very much so. It's interesting. Back to your point that this was way before COVID. I was a high school health educator, and so one of our units was stress. And so I'd have them list stressful events, and they listed only negative ones, right? Funerals, poverty, a breakup, an injury, whatever. So I made a list of things like planning a vacation, planning a wedding, your honeymoon, the birth of a child. And they're like, those things aren't stressful. I'm like, oh, but they are. They're incredibly
right,
stressful. Distress,
right.
eustress, positive stress,
Yeah,
negative stress, and how your body. And our problem in our culture is that we've created, and it's not just American culture, it's just modern living. We've
right,
we've been able to separate from Earth and separate from our day-to-day life, keeping us alive. We don't fight every day to stay alive. We have
right.
heat, running water, and medicine and everything else. But we have things to worry about now. Things that can just
Yeah,
niggle at us and eat our brain and keep us awake at night. And all that chronic stress. Now we're thinking the bear is going to kill us when really we just have a mortgage payment in 2 weeks and we don't quite know if we can pay it. Like two very different things. What did you study and what was it that sort of led you down this path?
yes. I thought about some of the pre-recording questions that you sent. First of all, just to preface, right? I've had my own share of very challenging experiences that, without communicating with my almost adult son, I'd rather not like spill out onto a podcast, right?
Yeah, yeah, right, of
He needs
course.
he needs to be the first person to hear stuff. But I will say that I, at a very young age, was always observing humans and how they responded to different things. And I learned at a very young age how to respond by observing other people. Now, I am always put my position on the fact that I am doing what I've been put here to do, to be honest with you. I
Yeah.
was a wild high schooler. I was, smoking cigarettes and drinking behind the stadium and doing all those things, but I was compelled to go into exercise science. And I was always very active physically, but I was also doing all these other things.
Yeah, yeah,
You know
yeah.
what
That
I
would be
mean?
me too. Yeah.
So I got a degree in sport and movement science at Salem State. I started my business before I was a freshman in college as a personal trainer. I specialized in neurodevelopment, neuromuscular diseases, MS, and such like that. And I just started continuing to observe people and their response to the world around them and how it actually affected their body, like on an emotional, somatic level. And that just evolved into learning more about this, and I studied somatic
Right.
psychology, and I learned how to, there was a period in my 20s that I really was challenged by what is my faith, what is it that I believed in. So I studied a lot of philosophy, I studied religion, and I tried to figure out what religion made sense to me because I was raised Catholic and I hated going to church and I
Yeah.
knew it wasn't like for me. So I was really more drawn and aligned. This is after checking out all different religions to Native American culture and
Hmm.
the sky and the earth and energy. And, I've studied human energetics. I am a soft tissue specialist. I have done everything human based. And throughout all of those iterations of my career, I've also looked at the psyche of people and like how this and this communicate with each other. We are around CrossFitters all the time,
Yeah.
right? And we won't mention any names, but there's a bunch of CrossFitters that we know who are pushing through pain in their body that shouldn't because they're
Right.
not listening. The
Right.
body, and I say to the clients that I see, I'm like, thank God your body is telling you what you need to hear because something is not right. You being stopped from doing something is your body's way of telling you if you keep doing this, something is going to get worse. It's going to hurt you. So we're not listening because we don't want to be stopped. We don't want to be not doing everything we want to do. Tying everything I did together, I discovered neurofeedback and how the brain is the kind of the master of how the nervous system responds to things. So I practice that. I've done that for a number of years. And I'm getting a master's right now in psychology with human behavior and stress tied into it. It's really like how the human being responds to stress. And it's really about stress. Like I said, there's labels for all these diagnoses,
I
and
know.
it's fine. It's fine. Every one of those symptoms, though, is exacerbated by a stress response that we're
Absolutely.
not addressing. We're
Absolutely.
addressing the label.
Right.
We're not addressing how we got to the label, which is
Correct. Oh
really
my,
the problem.
which is the
Really.
whole title of my podcast, A Thousand Tiny Steps. Like
Yes.
from the beginning to the whole process is all we can do is that next step to figure out all of that. What we do is we say, oh, you have a headache. So here's a pill that gets rid of the headache. Well, how about we walk backwards a bit to see when did the headache start? What was
Yeah.
going on in my
What's
life?
causing it?
What changes have I made? What external things happened? We don't take the time to do that. We just want to quickly fix
No.
the symptom.
I mean, as a practitioner in this
Yeah.
field, you really have to be ginger about how
Oh, yes.
things
Yes, yes,
are
yes, you do. Right.
approached because I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to project my own belief system onto
Right.
someone. That's not my
Right.
job. But, if a person's like, well, I'm never coming off this medication because I'm always, and I'll be like, well, here's the information about the medication and, whatever. And really about offering information that they are missing
Yeah.
or lacking or didn't even know what to ask for. Understand, most of what I'm trying to do is teach them to be an advocate for themselves,
Yeah.
right? So that they know that they can question something, but a lot of people just want it to be done. And
Yes.
change
Yes.
is hard and
Well,
change
because
takes time.
I just want to ask Siri, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
if I had a question
Just
about a
not it,
volcano in Italy, I had to go to the library or I had to find an encyclopedia. I couldn't
right?
ask my phone and get 50 versions of the same answer in under 5 seconds. Like
Right.
all that executive functioning, which is the other piece of it that fascinates me about the work you do, because modern culture, modern society, modern everything takes away the need to work for things. Everything is, you can have a robot vacuum your house. You have a machine wash your dishes. You have other machines wash your clothes.
We're not doing
And
anything anymore.
no, no. And so we have all this time that we used to work our bodies in a way that made us feel fulfilled. I don't like cleaning the house, but I will say when I white tornado my house and then I finish, I have this amazing serotonin release. I'm sure of it because I feel so good about it. Like, look at
Right.
my beautiful home. And do I want to clean my house 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year? No, I do not.
Right.
But taking care of where I live and creating a home that's pleasant shouldn't be diminished And that's just the home example. It could be your yard. It could be what you do for work. It could be anything, but we don't have to work so many things we don't have to work for with our bodies anymore. We can work for it with our worries. I look at, again, I come back to children in the school setting. They don't teach cursive writing anymore. So fine motor skills in your hand isn't about how well you make an A in cursive. It's about 50 things in your brain that now teach you to do this, this, and this. So 10 years from now, when your best friend, dumps you or gets injured or dies, you have a whole series of steps that, no lie, started with learning how to make an A in cursive. We lose all that. It's
The
interesting.
repercussions are really, that's what scares me the most. And you and I are going to be gone, long gone, before truly all of these skills have been replaced by some other mechanical
Right.
solution finder. Right now in my life, I want to make sure that I'm still connecting with human beings.
Right.
I'm still hugging people all over the
Yes.
place.
Yep.
I want to maintain that connection because I fear for our little kids and even my son, who's, a teenager. Those things are going to be very different when he's older. And
Yes.
when I'm gone, I keep on saying to him, like in the car, 90% of the time, he is not allowed to have a phone in his hand in the car.
Right.
Because if you're not looking around you, you're never going to know where to go.
Right.
You're not
Right.
going to know how to
My
get
daughter,
there.
she'll leave the house to go 2 miles in Concord somewhere and she'll plug it into her GPS. I'm like, turn that off. No, 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 no. What direction do we go? Start there. She's like, Mom. I'm like, stop.
It's hard because the
Yeah.
culture has changed, Barb, and the only people that we are going to help are the people who want to do it
Yes.
different.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
okay too. But I mean, our medical establishment, and I never like to sound like I'm not making friends, our medical establishment is not set up to make people feel better.
No.
It's really just a band-aid in a lot of ways. And with this next iteration through the shot that's making people lose all this weight, this is operating through a system that is trying to trick your body into thinking, that you have something that you don't. It's working through the endocrine system because I don't want to talk like I know what I'm talking about, but all I can
No, but
say
no,
as
I've
far
done a
as
ton
like
of
the
research on it too because it's
yes,
mind-boggling
like
to me.
yes, we have to teach each other or teach these people how to eat because food is fuel for the body.
Right.
And are you going to have to be on this forever now? And then what? We don't know what this does to people's bodies long term.
No.
And when you
No.
mess with the endocrine system,
Yeah.
you're messing with
Right.
more than just one thing.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that's a part. When you mess with
Oh, that gets into
hormone
adrenal function. It gets
responses,
into your
yeah,
pituitary gland. It gets into
yeah,
mood. It
yeah,
gets into heart rate, all the chemicals in your heart. I learned a lot of this when Molly was on life support, quite honestly, because she had like 9,000 bags of stuff. And I'm like, what is
right,
all this? I thought it was just
right,
keeping her heart, her lungs and they're like, no, Molly was brain dead. So nothing, no messages were coming to her body just because
right,
her heart was beating and there was oxygen. So they had to like plug her into all this stuff that would go to the kidneys and go like all these
right,
different things. And then they
right,
had like numbers and then they could adjust it. And I just looked at it and I remember her nurses saying, kidneys, pituitary gland. Like right now, neither of these things work for her.
right,
So we have to work for them.
right,
When I look at these medicines, because Kenny's a kidney transplant recipient, so
right,
he can be diabetic and he can't do any sort of things that boost your immune system because they need to keep his immune system suppressed so he doesn't reject the kidney, right? So it's
right,
like this contrary to living a healthy life. They put him on this medicine and he lost because he was holding on to all this weight. And it came right off. Now, he lives with me and I'm always on these eating food plans. So our diet is incredibly healthy. I mean, and we've eaten healthy forever, even in our worst of times, because when I joined CrossFit, I just took it on. I got into the healthy diet part. Like I haven't had a soda since 2012. Really, like I
right,
just don't drink it anymore. I used to drink a 6 pack of Diet Coke a day. But again, I see it everywhere. We want to change our bodies to fit what we think we should be, or we want how we should look, or how we should feel. Should we be sad? No, take this pill and you'll be happy. And It doesn't mean
Right.
that medicine doesn't help. I will say,
I know
in the
that. And
months
I'm
in the months
right.
after Molly died, Xanax saved me. But I don't want to be on
Right.
Xanax my whole life. I need to
Well,
figure out how to get unanxious.
I don't want to implicate anybody who is taking this shot, right? I don't want to seem unfriendly, but
No,
there's
no,
more to it because it's not even really healthy to lose weight that fast either.
no, no.
That's doing things to
The
the
body is
system.
going to panic and want to hold
Right,
on to calories, but it's not allowed
right.
to. And
Or other things. I mean, with bone function. But like what we really need to address is like how the weight got there in the first place,
right, right.
and what you're using food for,
Yes,
because it's
yes.
gas in a tank. And, I'm not trying to be critical. I'm using this as an example. I'm
No,
not
no.
trying to be
No, and
critical, but
it's a good and sadly, food, you look at any culture thousands of years back, food is more than just fuel sometimes. Food is comfort. Food is
sure.
communion. Let's have a dinner and be together. Any good old Italian mother, my college boyfriend's grandmother, Italian grandmother, and when I would go there in my skinny distance runner body, she would just shove food at me because it was this cultural belief that I should be fat and how will you grow a baby if you don't have flesh on your body, and this is how I can show you I love you. And so you look at food and all the roles it plays, and it's
Right,
no surprise that it's a manipulative tool, that it's
right,
an emotional tool. It's a million other things. The only people I think that
right,
truly eat so they don't starve are people who live in places where there isn't enough food. And then it
right,
becomes a survival. I need to eat, so I live. And a lot of the
right,
periphery goes away. There's no luxury to be worried about it, you know?
right. Right. Like I said, I don't want to implicate this one particular thing because that's not fair. Because it is helping a lot of people with, the obesity crisis, which is
Yes,
also a
yes.
problem. But like our society perpetuates obesity, everything is supersized, the healthy food is totally unaffordable. So
Right,
many people are eating food that isn't even healthy for them. And
right.
then like you're poking them with this drug. It's a cycle that we all have to get out of. We need to start taking control of our well-being. We
Right.
need to understand what that means for us as
Yep.
individuals because
Yep.
it's totally different. And we have to start listening to our nervous system because even if a person is anxious, it's like you're not anxious because you have a gene for anxiety. Your
No.
body is responding to overwhelm, and that
Yes.
chronic stress is producing all of these changes in your nervous system in your body. We have to address what the source of the problem is.
Yeah.
And I'm very much about the source of the problem.
Right.
Why are
Yep.
we here? Let's try to
Yep.
figure out how to get out of here.
Well, and that it sounds like a lot of the work that you do, either one-on-one or in like seminars, which I want to ask you about next, does that. Stop looking at a symptom as something that needs a quick fix and look at
Right,
how the symptom arrived and how we can invite it to leave.
right.
And maybe like I have a relative, a cousin who has so many different health issues, and she was just morbidly obese. She went on the medicine, it did nothing for 3 months, zero. 3 months on it, and she lost not a pound. And the doctors were
Mm,
baffled, and they said, well, then so she chose a Mediterranean diet. It's a pretty easy diet to follow. And once she eliminated sugar and a lot of the processed food and just ate fruits and vegetables and meat and nuts, and has lost a ton of weight, and now she's weaning off it because she already has enough issues in her body. And she had a really, and
overly
her sister,
strict, right.
yes, and her sister has some very similar health issues and is trying really hard to avoid using the shot. Joined a CrossFit gym because they know that I do it. I have a relative that their church owns a CrossFit gym. There's the church and the gym is attached to it. So it's
That's
all,
amazing.
yeah, really spiritual. And she works out and she definitely looks better, but she probably would benefit from like 3 months or 6 months on it because it might get her over that hump. But she wants to wait to see if her sister gains the weight back. Like if all it did was fake your body and it didn't fix it, then I'm not going to fake my body. Let's see what works. Yeah, we don't want to do it. So I saw on your website that you'll have like a seminar or talk, you can sign up and come here. So is that a big piece of your practice as well?
More so now, I started a nonprofit organization a couple of years ago to position myself as an advocate for people for mental health because most people are really centered on things that health insurance pays for, and my services are all out of pocket
Right, of
because
course.
they're not covered by insurance.
Because that guy in the
Um,
purple tie in Connecticut doesn't think it's necessary.
right, exactly. And
Yeah.
that's a whole nother conversation. But I'm educating people through the nonprofit, through different events about different health topics that are related to stress and how our body responds to stress. My next topic, which is on the 24th of February, is about understanding children's stress. Another one will be how our body responds to stress and how pain is the manifestation to that. That really born because of the nonprofit. And I'm like, I really like educating people. I love communicating. I love interacting with people. Part of what I do when I have a speaking engagement is I create an anonymous link so people can submit questions that they want discussed,
Yep.
because this interaction is very important. I think that it's a little bit more profound than having Zoom meetings all the time. I think
Right.
being in the energy of other people can be really uplifting and empowering. Even facing the fear of raising your hand and asking a question that you're not comfortable with. Like, this is what I'm trying to teach people in general. But there's so much misinformation out there that I want to be able to help people learn about their body, about the physiology of their body, because they're not understanding what creates anxiety. They just know that they have it,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Right.
And so, job as an educator is to bring that information to people. So that
Right.
is
Right.
becoming in my private practice
Yeah.
more of what I want to do. Yes.
Right. Well, as an educator, always looking for courses and seminars and things for teachers who work with other people's kids hours and hours a day. I look at all that you know and all that you do in dealing with the myriad of things that people come to you for.
In fact, that's
Yeah.
one of the things I try to get people to do. Like, if there is a topic that a person feels needs to be discussed and spread around, let me know, and I'm happy to get out in front, because I'm a human being, so definitely my thoughts and personal opinions kind of get sprinkled into
Oh,
everything that
yeah.
you talk
That's
about.
good.
but
But that's all right.
but I also don't want people to feel like going to a doctor these days is a very quick endeavor. It's not a
Yes.
lot of time, and questions might not come up at that moment. They have to
Right.
come up when they come up. And in my practice, I run it as a concierge service. If someone has a question, they don't have to wait until they come into the office to ask me. We communicate all the time,
Yes.
because the questions, that is power, is helping to answer the questions that are keeping them from feeling complete and
Yes.
feeling like they have all the knowledge that they need.
Right.
We're in the journey together to help a person heal. That's what I tell them. I'm like, we are in the process of you evolving. This is not like just when you arrive at my office. This
Right.
is a whole journey. We're
Right.
going to be in this together
Right.
until we're not. And that means I will be accessible to you. I love it because
Yeah.
I love helping people and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love sharing information.
Yep, same, same. My entrepreneurial coach slash mentor lives in Portugal, but I text her 50 times a week. Not that much, but I mean frequently.
Yeah,
And she doesn't always get back immediately, but I don't expect her to. But if it comes into my head, she wants to
yeah,
know that it came into my head.
yes,
So I
exactly.
tell her. And same with, Eric, our health guy at the gym. I talk into my phone 2 or 3 times a day to him because something
Yep.
comes up. And either I don't know how to log it or, what should I do next kind of thing. So I think
Well, the
that's
other thing
important.
too, I like people to know the purging all the thoughts
Yeah. Oh,
that
yeah.
cycle through. Like, let's make space
Yes, exactly.
in the brain,
Exactly.
and if they're running late, I'm like, don't stress about it,
Right.
because I make space so that if you're running late, you're running late. Our job is, or my job with the person, is to help them respond to stress in a graceful, more eloquent manner.
Right. Right. That's awesome. All right. So we're about winding down. Is there anything else in the wonderful things that you do that we haven't touched upon or that you would like to share?
I don't want thoughts and opinions about different medications. That's always been a thing for me, that I don't want anybody to think that I don't believe in medications or,
Right.
of course I do. But even with psychotropic medications and the science is there, you're not meant to be on it forever. You're meant to be
No.
on it
Right.
until you find a sense of stabilization.
Correct.
We are, as humans, we want to find equilibrium, right? When you have symptoms, you are out of equilibrium.
Right.
So what the goal needs to be is that we're trying to find that homeostasis, as you said, the equilibrium. When we have symptoms, something is not right. And so it's okay to investigate, ask questions, tell the doctor, that doesn't sound right to me. Use your instincts, especially as a parent. If something the doctor is recommending does not resonate with you, then say no. We're not doing that. You are allowed to use your voice because you know your children better than anything. And
Right.
Barb, you know this better than most people.
Right.
You are allowed to be like, no, this is wrong. We need to do it this way or that way or whatever.
What's your website called?
Dynamic Balance, MA, as in Massachusetts.com. I have a nonprofit that's tied to it. It's called the benefitofbalance.org. You can find them on each website. We raise money to help people who want complementary services. Kind of at the heart of it is the neurofeedback, because it's a financial commitment. It really is, because it's a number. It's like physical therapy for the brain. We're in the process of trying to build up our funds in order to provide this service to people who can't afford it. But we also do mentoring in both aspects. It's just the nonprofit is set up to help people who can't pay for the out-of-pocket services.
Got it.
So I want to speak in front of as many people as possible about taking more power back. It's not just like the hokey, personal power. It's more about information. And personal power is not hokey. That's not what I mean. But
No. But sometimes the activities can feel hokey. I know exactly what you mean. You're just such a logical tie-in to the things that every single one of the people that I have spoken with or will be speaking with, and the things that they've gone through. I think when I talk about, being old enough to see the pendulum swing back and forth with nutrition and health and medicine and exercise and education and all of it, eventually the pendulum will swing too far one way and it goes back. And I think we're in a time where collectively we're looking for something bigger than the pill. We have so much information, but I think all of us are searching for the ability to fix ourselves, that we must have it in us somehow, if we can't fix it, to at least make it something that we live with. And I look at my own life that way. I cannot ever have undead Molly. She will be a dead daughter for the rest of my life. And there's nothing that fixes that. People who haven't gone through this particular type of loss often criticize, well, that's a terrible thing to say. You're going to take hope away from people. I'm like, no, I'm not. I've just given them permission to acknowledge the fact that their child will be dead forever, and that will never change, and they shouldn't have to go back to something they can't be. But what's helped me is the things that you do. And even this conversation, I've jotted down these little notes over here.
Thank you.
So anyway, thank you for being on the show. I'm really glad that you did. So I want to thank all of my listeners for listening, and please reach out to Michelle or to me if you have questions, because you can tell we like to talk and we like to answer questions. So be good to yourself. And a great way to be good to yourself is to visit her website and see what you think. Be good to someone else. Send someone else to her website and see what they think. Also, trust in yourself and know that inside of your brain, no matter what you think of it, is the ability to be okay. We all have it. It's why we're all alive for thousands of years on the planet. Thank you for listening. And as always, have a good day, everybody. Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at Barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.